welcome back. Now we will start looking more closely at the spelling rules and patterns of the Greek language, starting with the vowel sounds. In this video, we will cover the vowel sounds associated with A, E, and I, and we'll finish up with O, U, and some other vowel sounds in the next video. Now remember what I mentioned in the last video, a lot of the sounds, in Greek especially, have many variations in regard to spellings, and this is where the roots will kick in. So in this video, we'll see real examples of what I mean by this and how we can use roots to assist us on learning these spelling rules. Okay, let's start with A. So all the sounds, vowel sounds associated with A. And the first one we're going to talk about is our A with two dots. A with two dots, which is noted as such. A with two dots, and this is pronounced ah. Ah. And the rule in Greek, I'm just going to write the rules out here and then we can talk about this. Basically, there's two options, either an A or an O. An A or an O. Now, how do we know which one to use? O is used more in roots, so it's going to be more often, and O is especially used in the middle. So notes on O, it's going to be especially in the middle, and that's where you're going to see the sound often, the ah sound. So O is especially in the middle, where the sound is more, most common. Also, O is used more in roots, and we'll see some examples soon. Used more in roots, and OS is a common ending. OS, pronounced os, is a common ending. So what can we deduce from this? Well, we can figure out that O is going to be the more common of these two. From A or O is going to be more common because of all these. So O is more common. Now A, the thing with A is its spelling for the ah sound is pure Greek. It's what, was used in Athens and Sparta. They used the A for the ah sound, but because of all the changes made to Greek when it's been, since it's been brought to English and, many other languages, O is going to be more common. But A can be used. It depends on the roots, if present. So A can be used depending on the roots, but definitely not as common as O. O is the most common, or the more common of, these two. And some examples we can take a look at. Examples. Change my color here. For O, I've got halakroal. I'm just going to put them here. Halakroal. Now here the sound is right here, halakroal. And as we're going to see later, when I talk about vowels regarding the letter O, we're going to see that O is the most common connecting vowel in Greek. Now if you remember from Latin, the big secret of Latin was that the connecting vowel was I, and you might recall that I said that O is the connecting vowel in Greek. And we're going to come to that later, but O is connecting vowel in Greek, meaning it's used, it's the most used in connecting two root words or two parts of a word to make a word in Greek. So there's that O. An example of O in a root would be ambrophobis. Ambrophobis. The sound is right here at the beginning. Ambrophobis. Ambros means rain. And if you know that, and you figured that out from the definition, something that fears water, phobos, meaning fear, like phobia, then you will know that it starts with an O. So there's that. Benthos, I'm going to put it up here. Benthos is an example of the common ending OS. Very common ending in Greek. It's the equivalent of US in Latin, the ending US. So OS, very common, pronounced os, so benthos. And an example with an A would be polemarch. And you know it's an A here, polemarch, because archos means ruler. So such roots are what can help you figure out if it's an A or an O. But if you don't know, or you don't know the root word, or you just have no idea, it's best to go with an O, because O is more common. but I hope you can see how the roots are very crucial in figuring out if, if it's an A or an O, or in other instances, which letter to use. Okay, so that covers the ah sound, and we're going to move on to short A. So let me erase this. Short A is pronounced a in Greek, and it's pretty simple, and we'll take a look in a second. So the sound is a, and the dictionary is just an A, like that, no marks to it. And the rule is it's mostly going to be an A. Mostly an A, just simple, no, extra letters or fancy letters, mostly A, just plain A. The thing is, it could be a G, where the G is silent, with a silent G. And this definitely does not happen as often as this. This is often the most common way to spell it. But if it is a G, it's going to be if the G is silent. And I've noticed that this usually happens before the M sound, the M sound. So it usually precedes the sound. And we can take a look at some examples. An example of the first thing, just A, is Panglossian. Just simple, you've got the A there, Panglossian. Pan meaning all, Panglossian. Rheostat. There's a lot of root words in here, stat, pan. So rheostat, just keep it A. And an example with the AG would be diaphragm. Hopefully a word you all know. See the M there, diaphragm. And again, this does not happen that often, so your best bet would be to go with just an A for the A sound. Okay, so that covers short A, which means we're left with long A. In Greek, A with a line over it, long A. Okay, now this is going to be noted A with a line over it, long A. And the rule for it, again, there's two options. It's going to be either an A or an E. Now, which one do we use? Okay, the more common of the two is A. More common, it's more often found in root words. The thing with E is that this is the classical spelling, what was used for pure Greek to represent the A sound. So it's, more classical, and it would be at the ends of words. If it ever appeared at ends of words, but that doesn't mean it's all the time at the end, but if you ever see it, it's probably going to be at the ends. So at ends of words, and it's the more classical, pure form of Greek, and that's not what we see today, so this is not that often. This is going to be more often. Example words are macron, just simple A, or ergasia. Asia is a common ending for lots of words, ergasia. An example with E would be koine, looks very Greek. If you know that this is a K, you can probably figure out that it's pure Greek because it's not CH, which is the more modern way to spell the K sound in Greek, and we'll come to that later. But if you know this is K, and you recognize it's pure, you could probably be sure that this ending is going to be an E for the A sound. So koine, agape is another one, agape. Again, very classical, pure Greek words. So, and that doesn't happen that often, so you're best off guessing an A because that's more common, you see it more often in roots. Macro means large, like macroeconomics, so certain roots that you see are going to have A more often, and that's why A is the better choice from A or E. So that's long A, and that concludes A. So we can move on to E. Okay, E, or sounds associated with E. in Greek. And the first one is short E, which is just the letter E, no symbols or markings with that. And this is pronounced e. And our rule is that E is the predominant way of spelling it. E is the predominant way of spelling it. It's the most common way to spell it. It's predominant way to spell the short E sound, to spell. The thing is, most roots have E for the S sound, such as nephograph and meristem. Let me get my example color, like nephograph. Nephos meaning cloud. Nephograph, very simple E, or meristem. Meris meaning divided. See, these roots are going to come in handy. Okay, meristem, here you got it twice. Stem is another one. So nephograph, meristem. This is why E is the predominant way to spell the S sound, because it's so common in roots. And because the root words make up most Greek words, the E is going to pop up the most for the S sound. So this is why E is the most predominant way. However, there are other ways to spell this. E-G, silent G again, E-G, and, or I should rather write or, E-G, or, now let me fix this R, or, O-E, E-G or O-E. They are viable options. Definitely not as common as E, but they are options. They're far less common, but again, they are options. And there's very few words with, using these. But an example would be phlegm, for this. From Greek, like phlegma, meaning flame. So you have the EG there. With OE, you have esophagostome. Esophagostome. Now, if you know the root word in here, which is esophagus, you might be thinking, well, esophagus can be spelled with an OE or an E at the beginning, but this word, esophagostome, is not spelled with an E at the beginning. It's not even an alternate spelling, so it's just OE here. So those are things you have to look out for, but, two examples of these rare spellings of the S sound, EG or OE, kind of rare. E is going to be the best way to spell it, or most common way to spell the S sound. So that's pretty intuitive. E is going to be used for the S sound, but you could have EG or OE. Okay, and that covers the short E sound, and now we can move on to long E. Long E, and all we need to do is add a line over or on top of this E we have to make it a long E, and long E says its own name, so it's pronounced E. There we go, E, just like that. And in Greek, there are a couple ways to spell this. Okay, so let's go through the rules. First of all, I'm going to go with the uncommon ones. OE, these are uncommon again, OE, and AE, OE or AE, may pop up. You would have to recognize the roots, if there are any, and you just, probably would just have to learn these words with OE or AE representing the E sound. Example words are Synesi, which is like this, Synesi, and Fiakris are examples. Now again, you would have to recognize root words to know if it's an OE or an AE. Basically, like in this word, Phios means dun-colored or dusky. So Phios means dun-colored or dusky, and you know that there's an AE in there, and then you can be sure that it has this root and it's going to be with an AE. So there's an example of that. So OE and AE are rare. If you recognize a root containing it, you should go with them. Otherwise, the other options, which are EI could be an option. EI could be. The thing with EI for the E sound is that EI is a common spelling for Greek, but usually it represents the long I sound, which is I. But sometimes it can represent the E sound, but most of the time the alternate pronunciation is going to be I. So if you get a word with the long E sound and you ask for the alternate pronunciation and the place where the E sound was heard is represented by the I sound, just the alternate pronunciation, then you can use EI because mostly it's going to represent the E and the I sound. So, ask for that alternate pronunciation. An example would be Gorgonian, right there. This is pronounced many different ways. Gorgonian is a way, so Gorgonian is two. So there, the EI could represent the E sound, not very common, but also could represent the I sound. So ask for that alternate pronunciation. Okay, now for the middle of words, in the middle of words, it's going to be mostly an E. So in middle, forget about O, E, A, E, and EI, it's going to be mostly an E. Very common spelling, mostly an E. And again, the roots will help you with this. An example is demagoric. Demagoric. Now, if you know that dem or demos means people, like democracy, demagoric, you will be sure that this is an E. And again, because the E is really commonly used in roots, there's a very high chance that the E sound, this long E sound, in the middle of a Greek word will be spelled with an E. And not so much for the endings. And we'll talk about this. Let me erase this. Just remember in the middle it's going to be mostly an E, and again the roots can help you figure out if that's true. But at the ends of words, let me change this. At the ends of words, it can be an E or a Y. Okay, now how do we know which one to use? Well, Y basically means lots of words end in Y, which Y usually means state or condition at the end of a word. State or condition. An English word would be like slavery or bakery, Y is usually a state or condition, and that holds true for Greek words. So if you figure out that it has something to do with a state or condition or it's a common word, it's gonna end in a Y. And most of the time what I've noticed is that if a Greek word ends in a Y representing state or condition, it's usually passed through Latin, late Latin. So if you hear that, that might be another clue, that can head you in the right direction, that it might be a Y. And an example would be synastry. Synastry. See? Y there for the E sound, synastry. Otherwise, the E is a very common ending for Greek words for the E sound. Very, very common. A lot of Greek words end in E, like both the sound E and the letter E, and that's very common for Greek. And most of the time, these are pure Greek words, like they sometimes pass through Latin, but usually they're originally just Greek. An example would be arche. Fit it down here, arche, or hypallage, hypallage, hypallage. Lots of Greek words end in the letter E representing the E sound. So if you're absolutely sure it's not a state or condition, you can rule out the Y, or it's just like a very pure Greek word, and you hear the E sound at the end, you can almost be sure it's going to be an E at the end for that. So I hope that clears up the E sound. One thing to remember is that the roots are very important here, as they are in most cases, but here they're especially important because there's so many ways to spell a certain sound. But pretty simple. You should be able to figure out which one it is using your root knowledge, or just trying to figure out or imagine the word. Okay, so that covers long E, and now we're going to go to that schwa with the dot on top, which falls under the E category because it's a mix of a schwa and a short I sound. So we're going to, put it with our E. Okay, So the sound looks like this. It's a schwa with a line on top, and it's pronounced I. I. It's really, really similar to the short I sound. There's not much of a difference, but we're gonna, use it with the E. Usually, the spelling, it's gonna be an I or an E. I or an E. And again, this depends on the root words in a certain word. It could be a Y. Not often could be a Y. These two are more often, because Y is usually reserved for just the I sound, the short I sound, but it could be a Y. Again, not so common. It's not so common. Y is usually reserved for the short I sound, but you might see it sometimes for the schwa with the dot on top, I sound. So, if you know it's not a Y, because that's not so common, it's still used, and we can look at some examples real fast with Y. Oxytocia. If you recognize the root oxy, meaning quick, then you know it's going to be a Y. Again, those roots, very important. So oxytocia is an example with a Y. With an E, an example is zetetic. Zetetic, right here at the beginning, zetetic. And with an I, archimage. Might recognize image in there, imago, archimage. So again, these roots are very important. The thing is, I is going to be more common because of the endings ESIS, ISIS, and YSIS. So let me draw a line out. I, it's going to be in words ending in ISIS, ESIS, YSIS, and you probably know that SIS is a very, very common ending for Greek words. Example is telesis. And all these I's here, this one, and this one, and this one, represent the schwa with the dot on top sound, I. So, because that's very common, if you hear Isis, or Isis, you should, be sure that the SIS, it's going to be SIS. The I is going to be used in the middle of those two S's. And that's what makes I very common, but E is also common, Y not so common. If you recognize it in a root, then you can use Y. Otherwise, basically I or E. If you hear Isis or Isis, make sure to use the I, and then otherwise it's really 50-50 for I or E. And you can figure that out using roots. Yay! Using those roots. Those roots are very important. That's the main, point here, is that, those Greek roots can really make the difference of, what letter you should use, and that can really make the difference of if you spell the word right or wrong. So the roots are very, very important. Alright, we're done with the E, and we can move on to I. So, I. Okay, let's start with the first sound. The first sound is going to be the short I sound. Short I, which is just I. No marks, pronounced I. It's pronounced I. And the rule for this is it's going to be an I or a Y. Now, here's one thing that's a very characteristic thing of Greek. Many people say, and this is true, that Y is very, very characteristic of Greek. That, it represents Greek, and Y is the most common way to spell the I sound in Greek. And it's true, Y is used very often, but you can't ignore the I. There are an sadly equal amount of words that have I for the I sound. So basically, this is really 50-50. Really, half and half. Let me fix this. Really 50-50. So, it's one is not preferred over the other, really. It's an I or a Y, and again, the roots are gonna help here. So even though Y is more characteristic of Greek, many people associate the Y with Greek, an I is equally used for the I sound. So the roots again help a lot in figuring out which one it is. So let's look at some examples. Hopefully that can help us realize, how we can use those roots. Example word with a I is philomath. Philomath. With a Y, bradycardia. Now really, the sound here for the Y, it's really the schwa with the dot on top, but there's a lot of words like this where it's kind of interchangeable. It can be a schwa with a dot or a short I sound. Like I said, there's not much of a difference between those two. So bradycardia and philomath. How do we know which one to use? Here we have an I, here we have a Y. Well, philos means love in Greek, and math is like learning or mathematics, so basically a philomath is a lover of learning. And if we hear that definition, the light bulb can, click or flash or whatever, and you will recognize PHIL, meaning love in Greek, and then you'll know it's an I. In bradycardia, brady means slow. It means slow. So if you hear the definition, which means a slow heart rate, cardia meaning heart, like cardiac, bradycardia meaning slow heart rate, you can immediately recognize the root brady meaning slow and know that there's going to be a Y. So these roots, I tell you, they're so important, and they can really help you figure out if it's an I or a Y in this case. Now, another example I can think of is the opposite of bradycardia, which is tachycardia. It's a fast heart rate, and again, tachys means fast. You've got that Y there again. So bradycardia, tachycardia, you recognize these roots, they have Y's in them, you know to use a Y. And then if you recognize a root with an I, like philomath, you know it's going to be an I. So that's that with I or Y. I know sometimes it's kind of hard when something is really 50-50, it's equal, but we can be really thankful that we have these roots to help us figure out which one it is. Otherwise, we would, probably have to, randomly guess. But because of these roots, we don't have to. So they help us. They save us. Okay, now we can move on to long I. This was short I, and now we're going to do long I, which is pronounced I. It has its own name. So it's an I with a line over it. And the rules for this, basically, there's 4 ways to spell this sound. This is a common, sound. 4 ways to spell the sound. Let's put that out there. There's 4 ways to spell the sound. Now, what are they? First of all, it's going to be mostly, if there's a number 1 spelling for this, mostly an I, a lot in roots, a lot in root words. If there's a second choice, next would be a Y for the I sound. And then finally, the last ways are also, it could be an EI or AI. And of these two, just of these two, I would say EI is more common. So if you had to order the ways to spell the sound, first I, next Y, there's not much of a difference between these two. Y is really, really close to I. So again, it's almost 50-50. And that's something we have to watch out for. But then the third would be EI and the fourth would be AI. Okay, now let's look at some examples and see if we can figure out how to spell, which one is the correct way or correct one to use. Okay, so the first one, the I is going to be mostly in roots, as in biology. If you recognize that bio means life, you're golden, you know it's I. Another example is isogogy. Iso means equal or same. Again, you've got the I there. So the roots again are gonna help us figure out if it's an I or a Y, as we see in dynamics. Dynamis means power. If you know that, you know this is a Y. Dynamics. Stylobate is another example. Stylobate. Stylo means pillar in Greek, so if you recognize that, you know it's going to be a Y here. So again, for the 50-50 kind of thing, the roots are going to help you so much in figuring out if it's an I or a Y. Now with the EI or AI, an example with EI is apeiron. Now pyro in Greek means end, A means not, so apeiron is like an endless something to do with something endless. So if you hear that in the definition and you recognize that pyro means end in Greek, you know the EI is going to be used. Example with AI is eithochroi. Eithochroi. Now AI is the least common way to spell this, but if you hear the definition, which is, characteristic of people with reddish brown skin, and you know that in Greek ithos means reddish brown, you can be sure it's an AI. Croi comes from like chroma, meaning color. So again, eithochroi, people with reddish brown skin. Itho, the AI, is in that root itho, meaning reddish brown. So again, the roots are lifesavers in this instance as well. So the I sound, 4 ways to spell it. First of all, I and Y is very close, very very, very close to that I. So I or Y, your first options. If you recognize the roots, go ahead and use whichever one is in that root, as these 4 words show: biology, isogogy, dynamics, and stylobate. Otherwise, it could be an EI or an AI, and if you recognize roots in those, that's another way to tip you off to the correct spelling. So that covers the I sounds, and we've covered A, E, and I, the vowel sounds associated with A, E, and I with Greek in this video, and in the next video we will finish up with O, U, and some other vowel sounds. I hope to see you in the next video.